Okay, so this doctor is conducting a test. You don't really have to know these details to get the question right. Look at your hypothesis statement. They're testing to see if a proportion is greater than 0.35. They give you the p-value. When you read real research, that's like the big number you want to look for. You want to know what type of test they're conducting, and then look for the p-value because that will tell you whether they found something interesting or whether they can't make any conclusions. This p-value is relatively low. It is less than 5%. An alpha of 5% is a 0.05 alpha. So since this is less than alpha, we reject the null hypothesis. Okay? And the reason, so here there's two options, reject, reject. These ones are out. The one we're going to choose is the one that compares the p-value to alpha. So third option here, reject the null hypothesis because the p-value is less than alpha. That's why we reject. So we didn't need all the context of the problem. It makes it interesting, but for this question, we're just making a test. And so to make a conclusion on a hypothesis test, you just look at the p-value. If that's less than alpha, you reject the null hypothesis. You've got statistically significant evidence. But in this case, there's a hypothesis test. They got a p-value. They're using this for alpha. The p-value is bigger than alpha. So there is not sufficient evidence. Okay. So to see the difference between the two, there is sufficient evidence if the p-value is low. There's not sufficient evidence if the p-value is high. So the first not sufficient evidence option, there's not sufficient evidence to include the proportion of where is more than 10%. So that's what their alternative hypothesis is. There is not sufficient evidence to make that conclusion. That's true. So that's the option we want. Because when you conduct a test, you really are, the interesting part is the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is status quo. The proportion is 0.1 like we expected. The alternative hypothesis is that something different has happened, that the proportion is greater than 10%, 0.10. So we found a high p-value, so there's not sufficient evidence to claim anything about that alternative hypothesis.